Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, the U.S. lobbies for a vote at the UN for a Gaza ceasefire, and the Hamas Ministry of Health keeping track of war casualties. Can their numbers be trusted? And an exclusive report from the front lines inside South Lebanon. Plus, fighting for their lives, soldiers and hostages coming back from the brink, thanks to healing care from a very special medical center. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The U.S. is pushing for a vote Friday on its version of a ceasefire resolution in Gaza. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is here in Israel to apply pressure on the Jewish nation. Paul Strand reports from Jerusalem.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is making it clear ahead of the UN vote that a ceasefire and hostage deal is a top concern for the U.S.
There's a clear consensus around a number of shared priorities. First, the need for an immediate, sustained ceasefire with the release of hostages.
While there could be a pause in the war, the feelings of hostility toward Israel remain, as new polling shows most Palestinians are still on the side of Hamas. 71% of Palestinians in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, known as the West Bank, say Hamas made the right decision to launch the attacks against Israel on October 7th. 94% think Israel has committed war crimes during the current fighting, but 91% do not think Hamas did. In fact, 93% say Hamas did not commit the atrocities seen in the videos of October 7th. But among Palestinians who have seen those videos, 17% believe Hamas fighters did commit atrocities against civilians. As the fighting continues on the ground in Gaza, Israel says it captured some 650 suspected terrorists in the military operation at the Shifa hospital this week, including top Hamas officials.
Many Hamas terrorist operatives and senior ones have been hiding in the hospital, and also Islamic Jihad group has been hiding in this hospital.
And Israel says it carried out the operation without any harm to civilians, even those working in the hospital.
Civilians, doctors, medic teams, none have been hurt.
And while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made clear Israel must launch an assault on the last Hamas stronghold in the city of Rafah in Gaza, Secretary of State Blinken made it clear before arriving in Israel today the U.S. does not support such an invasion.
A major military operation in Rafah would be a mistake, something we don't support, and it's also not necessary to deal with Hamas, which is necessary. We're going to have an opportunity next week to share in detail that view with our Israeli counterparts and to lay out our views on how to deal with the problem differently.
But Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer says Israel will go into Rafah no matter who opposes it.
Even if the entire world turns on Israel, including the United States, we're going to fight.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Our intrepid war correspondent Chuck Holden is back in town and stopped in to see us before heading to points of action in the north and in Gaza. Here's our conversation. Chuck Holden, it's great to see you back here in the land. It's been a few months, but you're here. You'll be reporting up in the north and the south. You've been away from here, but you've been following it almost on a daily basis. How are people in the U.S. and around the world consuming what's happening here in the land right now?
Well, as you know, news exists to report the out of the ordinary, and that's what we do faithfully wherever we go. But when the war gets to the point, whether it's the war here in Israel or the war in Ukraine or any other war, where it starts to seem ordinary to the people back home, it's very hard to keep their attention. And that's been a real challenge for the IDF, for the Israelis, to keep people motivated to pray for them, to support them, and specifically for the U.S. government to be on their side and sending them the aid they need. And that's and we've seen it over and over and over again, from Afghanistan to Iraq to Ukraine to here, that once the American people start to lose interest, you know, they kind of have a very short attention span, then things get much more difficult for the people that are here that have needs.
So even though it seems ordinary, a lot of things have been happening lately in the last couple of months. One of the things is information coming out of Gaza. People are quoting the Hamas health ministry. Over 31,000 people have died. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's famine. How would you say what's coming out of the information coming out of Gaza?
Well, I mean, it's very, very difficult to believe the stuff that's coming out of Gaza because of the fake things that have been coming out that get found out over and over and over again. So they say that there's, started out 500 people were killed by an Israeli missile that hit a hospital, and it turns out that was completely false, and it was probably a couple dozen people at most that were killed, and it was by a Hamas missile. Yeah. So start there, and then you go to all the videos that have come out of dead Palestinians, where then right before the video cuts off, the dead Palestinian sits up and checks Facebook on his phone or something. And it's not funny. It's propaganda, and it is being swallowed whole by the media at large. The numbers, they started out by caveating the numbers because it was understood that the Gaza Health Ministry is a wholly owned subsidiary of Hamas, and so the numbers would come out and people would say that, but they've gotten to the point where they don't say that anymore. Gone. The caveat's gone, and so they just quote this number. Even the president quotes these outrageously inflated numbers. There's a very good article that we were talking about that's come out recently that really broke down how it's almost statistically impossible for the numbers to be 37,000 dead or whatever, just by looking at how the Gaza Health Ministry increases the numbers by an almost exact amount of people every single day, no matter if there's a lot of fighting or a little bit of fighting. They don't include any combatants at all. They apparently every single person, according to them, that's been killed in Gaza was a unarmed civilian, and there's an exact ratio of women and children every single day. That's a statistical impossibility. And so when you see things like that, it makes it very, very difficult to believe anything that comes out of Hamas or the Gaza Health Ministry or UNRWA or the United Nations, especially as they've been caught red-handed lying about things over and over and over again. However, I have to say, the IDF has not been as transparent as they could be either. And partially they say, well, we can't have you running around in Gaza because it's too dangerous. Well, you know what? That's not their job. Their job is not to keep me safe. Their job is to let me do my job, especially when it comes to being that neutral, unbiased third party who can confirm the things that they say are happening. Right. And that's been a real challenge, and it's a real challenge in every war. Whether or not, I mean, obviously the IDF, the information that they're putting out is much more reliable. They've been much more transparent in terms of their own casualties and giving the names and how they died and all that. But at the same time, they could do a much better job of allowing journalists in there to verify the things that they say are happening.
Yeah. Well, we hope you can get there inside the ground and boots on the ground there in Gaza.
I brought my boots.
Okay, good. And we're grateful you're here, and we'll be talking more about while you're here in the land, up in the north and the south border.
All right.
Thanks so much, Tucker.
Sure.
Up next, we'll hear from CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas from inside South Lebanon. Around 80,000 Israelis have fled their homes in the north because of Hezbollah rocket fire out of South Lebanon. We spoke with the international correspondent George Thomas in Lebanon. George, you're in there in South Lebanon. Paint us a picture of where you're at right now.
Well, as one longtime resident of South Lebanon said to me the other day, we are swimming in a sea of Hezbollah. We are surrounded by Hezbollah. I am in Hezbollah territory. To my left, just over my shoulder, is a Hezbollah stronghold, Al-Qaim. About 2 miles in this direction is the Israeli city of Metula. And then you see these farms. These are olive groves. You've got oranges. You've got avocados. Many of these farms are owned by Lebanese Christians. And then I am in the Christian enclave of Clare. And, there are several of these enclaves around South Lebanon. Unfortunately, they have not seen the kind of sustained barrage of missile attacks from the Israelis because obviously these are Christian communities. They've been hitting in the last couple of days. Boy, oh boy, yesterday, Chris, I saw probably about 6 Israeli strikes on that ridge right there in Al-Akim. And then this morning, they hit a number of the farms in this region. And I'll tell you why that's important. In fact, we spoke to a Lebanese Christian just yesterday, and he provided us exclusive pictures and video of how Hezbollah is using Christian farms to launch, in essence, creating launch pads into Metula, into Israel. And obviously, Israel has had to respond, and he provided us those videos. We'll have a story on that shortcoming here on CBN News.
Yeah, such a beautiful day up there, George. Such a beautiful landscape. It's hard to believe there.
In fact, I was going to say, Chris, you can't see it right now, but Mount Hermon is in the distance. It's covered by a bit of cloud, but it's an absolutely stunning day. You can see the lush green valleys of South Lebanon.
You mentioned the Christian presence there. A lot of people, the focus has been on Hezbollah. A lot of people may not know how much of a Christian presence is there in Lebanon. Tell us about their reaction right now to what's happening.
Yeah, in fact, we did an interview with the priest, the Maronite priest of the longest-running church here in Playa. It was established, St. George's of Playa was established way back in 1890, and he said, we were around here during the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire came and went. We have been under tremendous challenges. We've seen so many wars over the many, many years. And he says the church is still here. It's so amazing that in a sea of Hezbollah, the church continues to do the things that it does best. And in fact, every hour on the hour, you hear the church bells of South Lebanon ringing as the missiles come in, the rockets from Hezbollah go to Israel on the Israeli side. So it's quite remarkable. They are very strong. They say to me they are not moving. They have been on this land for a very long time. They have no plans whatsoever to leave. Now, having said that, it is dangerous. They're very, very concerned that things could escalate dramatically. The other big concern is that they don't want Hezbollah fighters coming into Christian territories to fire off their missiles. In fact, that has happened in the last couple of weeks. The Christians of the communities, the villages will say, will in essence confront them and say, no, take your missiles elsewhere. Go to your communities, go to the Shia communities and fire off your weapons from there. We do not want this. The other thing I've spoken to over and over again to Christians here in South Lebanon, and they say, look, we do not want war. We want peace. They confront Hezbollah and say, you didn't ask us, you didn't consult us about this war. We do not want to be part of this war. So, the Christians of Lebanon, they are taking a very strong stance, and they have a history of fighting back. Sometimes they can be deadly, but they have a reputation of their ties to their land and how important their faith is and how it will continue to sustain them.
Yeah. Great report, George, and so much encouragement and information so people can be praying for the people there in South Lebanon for their protection and safety, our brothers and sisters there. Thank you, George, for your firsthand report there.
You're most welcome. Thanks.
Still ahead, a city under fire, the determined few living a few miles from Hezbollah rocket launchers. While the U.S. and Israel are locked in a battle over how to end the war with Hamas in Gaza, as we just heard from George Thomas, Israel is also fighting a limited war on its northern border with Hezbollah. And some believe a larger war is just a matter of time. Recently, a Hezbollah rocket hit the building where Valentina and Valery Shevtsov live in Kiryat Shmona.
The home shook.
We heard a loud explosion, but we did not expect it to be our building.
Kiryat Shmona's mayor explained these rockets hit indiscriminately throughout the city.
There were 22 hits that were direct hits of residential buildings that were a total loss. And the peripheral damage is even bigger. We have 4 kindergartens, 3 daycares, and 2 schools that were hit.
This is Kiryat, one of the largest towns along the Israeli-Lebanese border. The border of Lebanon is about 6 miles away. Most of the people have evacuated this city. Some of the more than 80,000 Israelis that have evacuated along the Israeli-Lebanese border.
Imagine Florida. You will accept 80,000 people will go because, I don't know, Mexico is shooting on you or Cuba. Which country accept that?
Overlooking the Syrian border near Lebanon, Reserve IDF Colonel Marco Moreno explains why he believes war with Hezbollah is the only way out of a situation Israel can't endure.
My suggestion strategic, like in strategic level, we don't care what they think. We don't care how they think. We need to do the job. It's our interest as a country. Guys, listen, it's crazy. Think about it. 80,000 people evacuated from their home in the north.
Moreno calls it a fight for Israel's survival.
This is the independent war. If we don't do it right, we are lost. All the neighbors are looking at us, all the Muslims are saying, let's see how the Israelis will react. If we don't say, let's go crazy here, it's done for us.
Meanwhile, the rumbling of war continues between Israel and Hezbollah. U.S. mediators like Amos Hochstein are seeking a diplomatic solution by trying to convince Hezbollah to pull its forces away from the border. Despite these efforts, Moreno still sees war as inevitable.
And a war will start in the north. Don't let anyone tell you stories. There's going to be a war in the north. It will happen and give you the signs for it. Once you see the volume is down in Gaza, when you see the volume is down, meaning the army is not, very busy there, which means it's going up. All the good troops, like 98 that is now deployed in Gaza, will go up.
Moreno adds that resupplying weaponry and the weather are also important factors.
In the meanwhile, we are getting from our American brothers all we need for the Iron Dome and for Air Force, and the weather will be better because of the tanks and. I'm assuming around May, maybe after Passover.
As for the many empty homes in Kiryat Shimona, only about 3,000 people remain, including Yehuda Elbilia.
There's no option. I need to work. I need to make a living. No one else will come here and work instead of us. It doesn't mean that if Nasrallah shells us, we shouldn't stop working. This is the situation here at the moment. And, God willing, I hope all residents will come back here.
Coming up, bravery and courage off the battlefield at Sheba Medical Center. Israeli hospitals are reaching breaking points after more than 6 months of treating civilians, former hostages, and wounded soldiers. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, one positive result is how Israeli Jews and Arabs are working side by side to save lives.
Workers inside Sheba Medical Center feel they're almost always on a near-war footing.
So October 7th, we got the word that something terrible was happening down around Gaza, and we started receiving the flow of patients in the afternoon and the evening into October 8th, which was the busiest day.
More than 1,000 soldiers and civilians have been treated here, and Steve Waltz tells CBN News cases include trauma, mental stress, bullet and shrapnel wounds. Then came those who had been held hostage.
We had a special team dedicated just to dealing with the hostages, where they get a doctor, a psychologist, and a social worker to deal with each hostage. And so today we've dealt with 32 hostages and 1 dog.
Sheba Medical Center is part of Tel HaShomer, the largest hospital in Israel. Since October 7th, they've treated some 70% of all the wounded soldiers.
So we've been learning on the run, and all the doctors who've been dealing with the hostages and even the wounded soldiers have more or less had to throw away the medical book. And we're rewriting it because from the soldiers' point of view, the doctors are seeing wounds we've never seen before, because every few years, unfortunately, the ammunition gets upgraded to it's more damaging to the body.
It's also affected Waltz personally.
In late October, one morning a helicopter was coming in, and I was alerted that a helicopter was coming in, and a minute or two later was my daughter on the phone saying, "It's Elia, my son-in-law, seriously wounded, landed at Sheba after being wounded by a mortar and a sniper when he emerged from his tank to check something on his tank."
After multiple surgeries and months in the hospital, Elia is doing well.
He's a hero, and he got tremendous amount of TLC here, like every soldier does. It was traumatic for the entire family. Of course, my daughter, they were married for less than a year. He made it out of that coma faster than anybody thought and rehabilitated.
Ro'i, a reservist, first fought terrorists inside Israeli border communities following October 7th. Then came the call to enter Gaza, where he was wounded, then brought to Sheba.
Really, really amazing. Everything that you need, they give it to you, and they do the best so you can go back to be like you was before the war, physically and mentally.
Ro'i feels he still has a long recovery ahead, and the trauma remains, but he's hopeful.
I want to go back to my work as soon as possible so I can continue with the regular life as good as I can. But I know part of me will still in Gaza. We are strong, we are united, and we're gonna win this.
Aaron, a reserve combat soldier, was on a business trip when Hamas invaded.
I got back from the United States and I joined my unit in the south as we prepared to be part of the first wave of the ground operation into Gaza.
After weeks of training, they entered Gaza on foot, going house to house looking for tunnel entrances.
From the second we got there, we were shot at constantly, so AK-47s, snipers, RPGs, anti-tank missiles, mortar shells. You get used to this cacophony of explosions around you, but you know, of course, that's tough.
15 days later, while passing a UN-operated school, his unit came under fire.
So my commander stops and he says, "Let's ask permission to go into the house." And when he stopped to do that, there was a sniper behind the school that was waiting for that opportunity to shoot one of our officers.
As Aaron ran back to save his commander, the sniper shot him in his leg, side, and back.
Is incredible. It's miraculous. The fact that I get to keep my leg, that I'll make a full recovery, all of this is not taken for granted.
He's been here about 4 months.
The unique way that people come together here, the Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis, you know, are united here in Sheba for one purpose, which is just to provide immaculate, incredible care.
Waltz calls Sheba a prime example of how Israelis work together.
25% of our staff are Israeli Arabs. Jews and Arabs working side by side to save the lives of civilians and soldiers alike. There's no differentiation. Something that we do during the year also with Palestinians that we treat from Gaza and the West Bank.
In order to be successful, Waltz says Sheba remains a politics-free zone.
You walk in the door here, we check our politics at the door. We're a hospital with a hope without boundaries. The war is outside of our doors, and inside is the battle to save lives.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Sheba Medical Center, Tel Aviv.
A remarkable expression of faith happened yesterday. Thanks to technology, millions of Jewish people around the world simultaneously appealed to God with the ancient prayer from Deuteronomy, the Shema. The Shema is a declaration of loyalty to God alone and to love and serve Him wholeheartedly. Jesus prayed the Shema and referred to it with His disciples. Tens of thousands showed up at the Western Wall. The faithful prayed on behalf of the hostages still in Gaza and for the safety of IDF soldiers. Together with one heart, they pleaded for God's mercy over Israel.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישריך.
What an amazing coordination of prayer in such a beautiful event at the Western Wall. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media and access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And please continue to pray for Israel, the IDF soldiers, and for the hostages in Gaza. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.